Hey everyone, and welcome to Milo Game Reviews, where we review games both new and old on all platforms. My name is Milo, and if you like the content that I make, then please subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell so you never miss a review when it comes out. Today we review the recently released Mafia Definitive Edition, which is essentially a remake of the 2002 game Mafia. I have a lot of love for the Mafia series, or at least the first two I should say, and have a pretty interesting relationship with them. I played this many years after the initial release after a friend of mine recommended it to me. He said he even had to wipe away a tear by the end of it, and that the story was really incredible. I must have played it 4 or 5 years after it was initially released, and definitely could feel that it had aged pretty badly on some parts, mostly gameplay aspects. But I did fall in love with the unique vibe and atmosphere, the interesting characters, and the journey that the game took me on as if I played the main character in one of Scorsese's Mafia movies. When Mafia was released, the world was already taken by storm 1 year earlier by GTA 3 that set the standard for open city action games, of which the blueprints are still seen up to this day. Many clones of the GTA formula would be released in the following years, but originally Mafia 1 was made for PC only, giving it some advantages over GTA 3 that was a PS2 game. The obvious thing that came to mind was that the game could be prettier and maybe also introduce gameplay aspects that weren't possible with GTA 3. The game indeed looked a lot prettier with clearer textures, prettier character models, and increased view distance. Mafia also had a lot more sections that were indoors, although these were still often separated with a loading screen. But it added to the variety of the missions back in the day and gave the city and its inhabitants just a bit more life to them. But another unique selling point was of course the atmosphere of 1930s America, which was so rare to behold in video games. The game was critically a huge success and got great scores, but financially it was but a modest success, especially in short term. The game managed to sell 2 million copies in 6 years, and though the 2 million definitely is good news, I'm sure the creators would have loved to sell that number in less time than that. But the game did not only get good critiques due to the better graphics, the atmosphere, or the more variety in interiors and locations, but also because of more realism. The game was considered a lot more difficult and hardcore than GTA 3, which by comparison felt arcadey. For example, you actually had to abide by the rules on the road, including speed limits, waiting for red lights, or not driving on the wrong side of the road. If a police officer or patrol car would see this, they would pursue you in response. Though this sounds frustrating on paper, it actually turned out pretty fun and unique. You really felt like you were infiltrating everyday life and had to pretend you were just another ordinary citizen until there were no cops in the area, and then you could just floor it. But shootouts were also significantly more difficult, and I remember overall thinking that Mafia 1 was really brutally difficult at some times. It has been a long time since I played it last, probably close to 15 years or so, but I always remembered how brutal the gunfights were. But when I looked up some footage to refresh my memory from the old game for this review, I also had to admit that what I saw definitely did not age well, and much of the gameplay, the gunplay, and elements like voice acting hadn't aged well. There was a lot of room for the remake to improve upon. But the real question was if it would keep the same spirit and keep it pretty hardcore and difficult instead of making it too mainstream. Let's find out if they succeeded in doing that. First, let's talk about the graphics, because that's always what first comes to mind when one thinks of a remake. The game in my opinion looks great, but won't win any graphics competitions. The engine that this is built on is a tweaked engine of Mafia 3, meaning that the engine might even be a bit older than that. Character models, lighting, and reflections look amazing. But if one were to look at some of the details like textures, skyboxes, or environmental objects like vegetation, one can indeed see that this is made on an older game engine. Nevertheless, the game is still quite the looker, and the unique art design of the 1930s makes up enough for some of the lacking graphics, since everything just looks so different from the open worlds that we are used to. They managed to really recreate that city feeling of the old game with familiar landmarks like the giant red bridge. All of the billboards, the retro cars, and the music that plays on the radio all really convey that 1930s era, which is very, very cool. The cutscenes themselves are the real highlight of the game, with good animations, voice acting, and overall graphical fidelity. But the same animations unfortunately do not hold up when you are playing in-game. I have often seen characters move very robotic or unnatural when heading towards and entering a car. They simply follow a static line, and their animations abruptly change when a new action is necessary. Certain fight animations or stealth kills also are very choppy and not very believable. What's more is that animations within the vehicle are very static. An example is when one of your buddies, Polly, is very drunk, and the voice actor is doing a very good job of portraying that he's wasted through his voice work. But the animations in the car aren't there. He's just sitting there moving his mouth up and down, and by now, we are used to much better animations even inside vehicles that have come to be the standard in even games like GTA 5, a game that came out 7 years earlier than this. In that sense, one can see that this studio did not have the same amount of time and financial aid as their Rockstar half-brother. You are often in areas with a lot of random NPCs, and though these unique set pieces are very cool to look at, they fail sometimes to convey that it's a living, breathing environment. Honestly, games like Red Dead Redemption 2 and GTA 5 have kind of ruined that for many open-world games by setting the bar so high. But what's quite interesting then, is that on the other parts, the animations then surprise with, for example, bullet impacts. I noticed multiple times that when hitting a target somewhere on its body, that the enemy would grab towards that area that he was shot in, or he would limp away while holding his leg, which I was happy to see that they put in details like that. Also, I mentioned it briefly earlier, but the voice acting in this game is a lot better than the original. I know that the original game had its share of hardcore fans who defend it, but when I re-watched some of the cutscenes, I thought that the voice acting was quite cringe-worthy sometimes. For back in the day, the voice acting was actually top-notch. It really conveyed that mobster vibe with how all the characters talked, but the delivery was just sometimes very cheesy, cliché, or without any emotion. There's no way that one can defend those bad line deliveries, even if he or she loves the first game to death. In that sense, with the cutscenes, animations, voice acting, and line delivery, the remake aces that out of the park. Characters like Polly are beautifully recreated, with a lot of emotion behind its voice, and characters like Sam are greatly improved on too, with an awesome look in this game and a great performance by the new voice actor. And pretty much all of the characters are improved upon too, though the Don of your Mafia family is a lot more animated here, which made him look a lot younger. The Don from the old game was almost always sitting, and that did add to that Godfather vibe with him. So a few nitpicks here and there, but overall the graphical and audio presentation is improved upon greatly compared to the first game, which is not a surprise since that game is almost 20 years old. The music, however, was already sensational back in the old game, and that is still the case here. The opening cutscene has this bombastic theme playing as the camera sweeps through the city, and it really had me getting goosebumps just hearing that iconic theme and realizing I was back in this world I loved to play in so many years ago. Other songs like the swooping dramatic score where you need to escape a prison from the cops also really gets the blood pumping in a good way. Overall, stellar soundtrack that still holds up today. Then what about the gameplay? Well, let's first see if the game tries to replicate its more difficult older brother back from 2002. The answer is in some ways it stays true to how difficult the original was, but in other parts, it's definitely a lot easier, but not in a cheap way in my opinion. First of all, you have the choice in the beginning when you set up your game and can choose between easier police behavior and more difficult police behavior. With more difficult, they will indeed chase you down if they spot you going over the speeding limit, but their visibility range is very limited, and I also never got stopped for going through a red light or riding at the wrong side of the road. Overall, the experience on the road was much easier, and I only had the cops chase me down 3 or 4 times because I kind of forgot that the speed limit system was even implemented within the game. Just like the old game though, you can push a button to limit your speed so you don't have to worry about going over it by giving too much gas. Inherently, I'm a big fan of customization in video games, where you can make the experience as difficult and as hardcore as the originals, but also can still make it easier if that is what you want. The latest 2 Hitman games are great examples of this, where you can adjust all the settings to make it as hardcore as the originals, or make it a bit easier like Hitman Absolution. You kinda can do the same thing here, with also adjusting car control to be more simulated, and it does mean that you can lose control over your car far easier, and things like wet roads have far greater impact. But what I remember about the first game is how it starts you with a mission, where you are driving in a taxi and need to lose some pursuing cars. For whoever had only played games like GTA up until that point, this mission was already pretty difficult, because your car was easily damaged and fairly difficult to control in comparison. What's more is that the chasing enemies did a great job of keeping up with you, and you really had to lure them in an obstacle to hopefully get rid of them. I think the first time I ever played Mafia, it took me a couple of times just to complete the first mission. Here, however, it's so much toned down and in my opinion, a bit to a fault. Though luckily, they don't do this in most other missions after this. Instead of having to manually lose those that chase you, you can now drive to various icons on the minimap, and if you do, a short cutscene will play where one of the chasing automobiles crashes. It's not very satisfying because it doesn't feel like you were the one that managed to shake them off. Now, to those familiar with the old game, they might have a bit of a weird sensation in the beginning when driving around in this game, because the camera swerves around the vehicle quite a lot, especially when you make a sharp turn. Though I thought it was a bit off-putting and weird at first, I did grow to really love it, and it looks very cinematic in the end. There are also small touches and details that do get appreciated, like the noise of the radio getting muffled if you drive through a tunnel. The gunplay is also very different, and though it's a lot easier, and that might not be to a lot of people's liking for those who love the difficult nature of the original game, but that isn't to say that this is an easy game whatsoever. If you play this on hard, or even on normal, you are not a one-man army that can take an insane amount of shots. You can be quickly killed if you are out in the open, probably around 5 or 6 shots are enough to put you down. The big difference with the old game is that now you can head to cover with the push of a button, and that is a welcome addition without it feeling like it betrays the original. The crouching cover mechanic is a dangerous tool since so many games nowadays utilize it, and sometimes it makes it just feel like a basic Gears of War clone. But if done well, like here, it can actually add to the experience since you are never 100% safe if you are behind something. If you linger too long behind cover, the AI will try and throw Molotov cocktails at you to flush you out. Overall, the combat feels a lot smoother with more responsive controls, yet you won't feel like you are playing Call of Duty. The crosshairs for your weapons are quite big, annoyingly so I thought in the beginning. It might be to replicate that you are indeed not a trained soldier and thus your accuracy is pretty bad. But basically, it will take a while before you get the hang of it and you'll be making headshots. It's definitely possible at one point in the game to be quite accurate, but it requires some time getting used to it. Also, weapons like the Tommy gun have an incredible kickback and you are better off just using short bursts than spraying and praying. In that regard, I think it stays pretty true of how difficult the combat was back in the day. There are also some missions where you will get some help from a few buddies, and I have seen them actively shoot down enemies as well, so they are not completely useless, but you are still expected to do most of the work. The story of the game is simple, but very effective due to the great voice acting and good character design. You play as Tommy, a simple cab driver who becomes involved in a gang wars between 2 mob families by accident. One night he stands in the corner and 2 members of the Salieri family, Polly and Sam, are being followed and get into your cab and order you to drive them to safety. Once you do, you actually get paid by these guys and you get paid a lot. Yet the Mafia life does not seem all that great to Tommy at first, and so the next mission is you driving around customers through the town in your taxi. I was very surprised of how close the creators stuck to the same mission structure to the original. You really get to go down every beat of the original story, though some missions are a bit tweaked, like the cigar box mission. Once you have driven around some customers, a few thugs that were involved with the car chase the day before recognize you, and you have to run from them, only to end up at the headquarters of the Salieri family, who get rid of the thugs that chased you. Tommy then wants revenge on those thugs for breaking his cab, and the Salieri family then takes you in as you start doing missions for them. First, real simple ones, like destroying cars of the members from an opposing mob family. This mission is much inspired from a scene from Goodfellas, and there are a ton of references to movies like The Godfather or mob movies by Scorsese. There's even a building called Scorsese Imports and a character with the name Corleone as his family name. So through these missions you rise in the ranks of the family and take part in missions that involve bootlegging during the Prohibition, car racing, extortion, heists, sabotage and assassinations, and more. Most of the story revolves around an increasing feud with the rivaling Morello family, but I appreciate that the story, this also goes for the original, goes way beyond what it's like for the characters after that mob war is over. Once the war has settled, there's still a good 3 to 4 hours of campaign before the end credits roll, and this also takes place at the end of the 1930s, being that a lot of the cars and scenery has changed. The amount of characters you interact with is few, but they are very well written and many are memorable. The stuttering Ralph, who fixes your cars, or the laid-back Vincenzo, who gets your weapons, or the old-timer Luigi, who works the bar after he has retired the stressful life of a hitman. The story will not turn any heads for originality, and is even guilty of some cliches, but with a Mafia story, you kinda want those cliches and it hits all the right notes that you want from a setting and adventure like this. But let's now talk about the big elephant in the room, and that is the mission structure and setup. To put it very simply, since the game that this is based on is so old, it also means that the style of the missions adheres to this mandate. That means, in general, that you won't have any surprises whatsoever when it comes to the missions that you play here. Unlike games like GTA, you don't get to drive around freely and go to a new mission whenever you want. Yes, there is a free drive mode where you can freely explore, but that is a separate mode and the single player campaign just takes you from mission to mission after each one is complete. That can make the tempo sometimes seem a bit high, which is not a big problem in my opinion, but it can mean that some characters will make their exit before you got the feeling you really got to know them. I know, however, that for many reviewers out there, it might be a problem of how little there is to do in the city itself. This was by many reviewers a big critique point with Mafia 2, since you could not really do much side questing or optional stuff, and there's a few extra things here like collect all the cars that are in the city, but all in all, it's not a city you can explore and then can do mini games like delivering pizzas or drive an ambulance to accidents. But here's the thing, I don't mind that at all, and I do not think that is a requirement of any open world or open city game. I find that by many reviewers, there's too much emphasis laying on what optional things there are to do sometimes in these open world games, because most of the times it's very tedious, repetitive, and plain right boring. Final Fantasy 15 is a great example of this, where the story and characters are great, but horrible side quests like collect dog tags or certain colored frogs feel like exploring the world is more like a chore than actual fun. I don't need all these optional minigames or side quests because most of the time they aren't that fun. Now that also doesn't mean that I always hate them. I actually really like them if they're implemented well, like with the Yakuza games, where the minigames also have quests linked to them, or GTA 5 City, where doing the side quest is necessary to get enough money to continue the main quest. Having an open city simply as a background decor is more than enough and still creates the illusion that you are in a vast and interesting world, so the fact that there isn't much to do in the city besides the main quest is not really a critique point in my opinion. But let's return to the earlier mentioned simple and aged mission structure that I was talking about. The type of missions you will get are the type we are all too familiar with since GTA 3. Drive to here and take out this guy, or blow up this vehicle, drive behind a car and don't get too close or they will spot you, etc. But also missions where you, for example, are chasing a car either on a bike or in a car of your own, and you are kinda advised to shoot at it or take it down. But the whole point of the chase is to get to a certain area, and then a cutscene will play where the person in the car you were following will leave, and then you will continue on foot and have a shootout in a different place. You were not supposed to kill or take out the vehicle in the first place, and so all that shooting you were doing from the vehicle means nothing. It basically means that you just have to continue the chase for as long as the game dictates until the cutscene triggers. This type of gameplay has really aged badly because it feels like your actions have no consequences whatsoever, which they indeed don't. I think even GTA 3 already did this better in some ways, where you had to, for example, chase down a certain character as they drove off towards the airport. If you could manage to blow up their car before they would arrive, you would succeed the mission, or if they arrived at the airport, they would get out of their vehicle and run away on foot, giving you still a little bit of time to kill them that way if you ran after them. That type of dynamic gameplay is simply not present here, and in that sense, it really feels like an almost 20-year-old game. But the turn side of that is that by having these scripted events, you do end up in many different areas like a dockyard, a farmhouse, or a train station to fight it out. Now it also doesn't mean that all missions are very vanilla and feel that familiar. There are a few standouts that stood out back then and still do today. There's a mission where you head into a gentleman's club to take out the manager and blow up his office, only to then have a chase over the rooftops that ends with a shootout in a church. The gentleman's club itself is really pretty and detailed, with old style furniture, art, and overall vibes. or the mission where you are on the steamboat, where, a la Godfather, you need to retrieve a pistol hidden near the toilet and take out a politician with it. During this mission you are disguised as one of the boat staff, so it has a bit of a Hitman vibe to it, which is cool. Many of the areas you go to, like a seemingly abandoned prison, are presented without loading screens and are quite detailed and feel unique. Though the missions might still feel a bit vanilla, the setting, tone, and areas often make what the best missions the game has to offer stand out. Another mission that is pretty unique is where you need to sneak into a giant mansion that has a labyrinth in the backyard, and first you need to stealth kill all of the guards before heading in and finding a secret safe behind a painting. But this mission, along with a few others, also gives light to another problem with the game, and that is a pretty shabby checkpoint system. If you fail a mission requirement or get killed, it's not uncommon to be set back quite a bit, and it can sometimes be a bit annoying. The stealth mission I just talked about has the most annoying part, since you need to start all the way over if you fail to take everyone out stealthily. I did not have to do it over again a lot of times, but still the amount of minutes you are set back is quite a lot. Same goes for the chase sequences. Now, I have mentioned quite a lot of negative things, and I should say that for me the checkpoints are the biggest problem with the gameplay, because the familiar mission structure is not an issue for me since I know what the game was and is. The simple mission design is, in my opinion, only a problem for those who are used to games like GTA 5 or Red Dead that have far surpassed this in terms of missions and production design, and for those people there won't be any surprises aside from a few unique areas you will visit. So again, in the end, it might have sounded like I listed quite a lot of negative things, but in the end, I still really like this game. It's not a remake that will go down in the history of one of the best remakes ever, like Resident Evil 1 or 2, but it does succeed in what it tries to do. Some also argue that remakes should tweak gameplay to the point where they get rid of the annoying or bad parts of the original, and though I agree with that to a certain extent, I still think it's important to keep the spirit alive of the original. I think Mafia Definitive Edition does this. Yes, the original from 2002 is still more difficult and punishing, but it's also way more clunky, with really stiff and wooden controls, badly aged dialogue delivery, and graphics that also have seen their best days. I can wholeheartedly recommend this to any fan of single-player story-driven games, or those who find the idea of playing an engaging game in the setting of 1930s as a mafioso appealing. The remake does what it needs to, and that is present the same game with some tweaks here and there with a fresh new coat of paint and audio. It probably won't top any of the charts this year, but it's still a ton of fun and a great 10-hour journey for both newcomers and veterans. In the end, Mafia Definitive Edition gets a 7.9. If they had tweaked the missions just a bit more and that you did not have to adhere to the very strict linear rules or have made better animations or details, it would have definitely rose above an 8. Its setting is still the most unique selling point of this game, and in terms of that, there's simply no other. I am also still a big fan of the second Mafia game, and might secretly even like that more than the original. I'm sure I will review that game in the future sometime on this channel, and maybe even dip my toes in the apparently horrible third entry.